Good day. My name is Berkenda, and I'm the Director of Operations and Strategic Projects here at OmniAir Consortium. Before we get started with today's webinar, I have just one reminder, and that we definitely encourage questions. We will have time for Q&A near the end of the presentation. However, feel free to submit questions at any time in the Q&A box as they come to mind. We'll get to those at the very end. Now, before I introduce our panelists, I would love to have our Executive Director, Jason Conley, please join me on the screen. Jason, please join me.
Okay. Wait 1 second. Okay, very good. Can everyone see me?
You're good.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Berkenda, and thank you to each of you for taking the time to join us today for our 1609.2.1 virtual security testing event webinar. In conjunction with this webinar this week, we will be hosting a virtual testing event for our members from around the world, testing a very select set of test cases for security of connected vehicle devices. This is part of a much larger certification program that OmniAir Consortium has developed for the certification of cellular V2X technologies, or cellular V2Everything technologies. On behalf of OmniAir Consortium, I wanted to welcome our guest presenters. I'm sure we will learn a lot from each of them today. However, for those of you who are not familiar with OmniAir Consortium, I just wanted to share with you a little bit about the organization and our mission and how what we're doing this week fits as part of that. OmniAir is the leading industry association promoting testing and certification and interoperability for ITS tolling and connected vehicle technologies. We have over 90 members from around the world. We have a diverse membership that includes automotive OEMs, device manufacturers, chipset providers, cybersecurity experts, test laboratories, test equipment providers, and deploying agencies, infrastructure owner-operators, including tolling agencies, state departments of transportation, cities, and other municipalities. Our certification programs are designed to build trust in communications devices used in transportation. We ensure that devices conform to industry standards and meet minimal interoperability and security requirements. Our goal is to ensure that we have more trusted devices available for deployment, which should lead to widespread adoption of what we rightly believe is life-saving technologies. From a cybersecurity perspective, as more and more of our cars and infrastructure are connected, we will see a cybersecurity risk that increases, that the attack surface grows. It is more important than ever to ensure that we have secure devices and that we're able to authenticate the safety messages and ensure the integrity of the devices being deployed. This webinar will feature leading experts in cybersecurity, connected vehicle technology from government and industry. They will discuss specific aspects of the V2X security that is being tested this week. But this is only the start of the testing that we're doing. What you'll hear about at the end of this webinar is an event that we're holding in November in Taipei, where we're bringing connected vehicle technologists from around the world for a week of intensive testing for conformance, interoperability, and security in laboratory and field environments. And this is part of the journey toward ensuring that we have tested and certified devices available for deployments. If you are interested in learning more about OmniAir Consortium, I would invite you to visit our website at www.omniair.org. And with that, I will turn it back over to Ms. Cantlow, who will introduce our speakers. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jason. All right, well, as Jason mentioned, we have not one, but 3 industry experts here today. If I could have Justin, Virendra, and Brian, please join me on screen. Thank you so much. Okay, well, right now I'm going to read your bios, so please buckle up because you guys have so much going on. First, let's start with Dr. Virendra Kumar. Dr. Virendra Kumar is a senior staff engineer in the Standards and Industry Organizations Group at Qualcomm Technologies, Inc. At Qualcomm, he is involved in research and standardization efforts in the area of V2X communication security. He also has an active research interest in the design and implementation of efficient protocols for secure multi-party computation. He has been extensively involved in the original design of the security credential management system and its subsequent security and privacy enhancements. Dr. Kumar has over 17 years of research experience in the areas of cryptography and information security. He is the technical editor of the IEEE standards 1609.2-2022 and 1609.2.1-2022, and the sponsor of the SAE J3287. He has been a participant and contributor to various standards and industry organizations, including 5GAA, where he currently serves as the chairperson of Working Group 7, ETC-ITS, IEEE SA, and SAE. Before joining Qualcomm, Dr. Kumar was a director of OEM consulting at Onboard Security, Inc. And before that, he was a principal scientist at Security Innovation, Inc. He has published several research papers and authored multiple patents in cryptography, V2X communication security, and information security in general. Welcome, Dr. Kumar, and thank you. Next, we have Justin Anderson. Justin Anderson is the program manager for the Next Generation Wireless Communications and Secure Credential Management Systems programs at the Department of Transportation's Intelligent Transportation Systems Joint Program Office. He has over 20 years of experience providing systems, engineering, and cybersecurity support across a range of Department of Transportation, Department of Defense, and Department of Homeland Security projects within the last 8 years, working on ITS architecture, standards, and cybersecurity programs, including the development of the proof of concept V2X misbehavior detection system. He is also a certified systems engineering professional and certified information security systems professional, CISSP. They're two different things. Next, we have Brian Romansky. Brian has extensive experience in security technology and innovation in critical infrastructure, defense, automotive security, payment systems, healthcare, and logistics. He has held chief executive positions at leading cybersecurity firms responsible for managing product planning and new technology innovation. Brian was a member of the Crash Avoidance Metrics Partnership, technical team that developed this SCMS architecture, protocols, and EE requirements. He has been engaged as an expert advisor by the U.S. Department of Transportation and Transport Canada to make implementation and deployment recommendations for national V2X deployments and SCMS infrastructure. He is an inventor on 25 U.S. patents. He has a Master of Science degrees in Electrical Engineering and R&D Management from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and is a PhD candidate in the Systems Engineering program at George Washington University. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I appreciate your time. I know the three of you are very busy. With that, I'm going to turn it over first to Justin Anderson to discuss the role of 1609.2.1 in supporting V2X adoption.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone for joining today. Let me see. Can you see my screen? Whoops, wrong screen. There we go. All right. So today I want to talk about why the DOT is encouraging 1609.2.1 certificates. And it really all relates back to interoperability. So where are we right now in the sort of the V2X communications timeline? And, you know, we've got some regulatory certainty now with LTE V2X being the technology deployed to the 30 megahertz, 5.9 gigahertz safety band. And so, you know, the DOT feels that now is the time to start deploying V2X technology. It can save lives, and, you know, we've done a lot of testing and research to show that we feel this technology is ready, you know, to start being deployed at a wider scale. And going hand in hand with that, obviously, interoperability and security are critical to this national deployment of V2X technology. And that's really where 1609.2.1 comes in. You know, from my perspective, you know, 1609.2.1 is really the key moving forward to enable that that interoperability between SCMS providers through that certificate trust list. That's necessary for those that have worked with state and locals in the past, state and local transportation agencies. Most of them like to have multiple vendors available to them, right? To provide them both infrastructure equipment as well as services, and so having a multi-vendor ecosystem that's interoperable is obviously extremely important to the DoT. And that's really what 1609.2.1 enables. It also does some other things, right? It enables some capabilities that we feel make it a little bit easier for those state and locals to operate and maintain infrastructure equipment. A great example of that really is the ability to add certificates for new PSIDs, new applications or services after the device has been installed, right? After it's been enrolled and bootstrapped with a SCMS provider. When you hang an RSU on a pole, you don't have to pull it down every time you want to add a new PSID or a new application. And so if we can, adding that capability to sort of add a PSID later and new certificates later is really sort of a key thing from our perspective in helping state and locals operate and maintain these devices. And 16.2.1, does that. The way I think about it is, the CAMP POC, the CAMP SCMS system was a great initial system. It worked really well for the CV pilots. I think it proved that a PKI infrastructure system works, right, for providing that trust and security of connected vehicle messaging. But there were some aspects to it, I think, that sort of hindered a nationwide deployment, would have made it more difficult. And I think 1609.2.1 really helps resolve a lot of those national deployment type concerns and issues. So what is our role moving forward in sort of the SCMS? Well, one, I think the DoT understands that it does have a role in V2X deployments, and SCMS is an important part of that role, right? We are trying to, encourage more and more, local infrastructure owner operators and state and local transportation agencies to deploy this equipment, and with that, I think it's part of our role to help wherever we can, and SCMS is part of that. And as part of that, I will say that the DoT is restarting through the ITS JPO an SCMS program, and I am the lead. That's my email address there, and we have been internally coming up with some ideas and some plans and putting together funding proposals for an SCMS program. As many folks know, the federal government's fiscal year starts October 1st. So, I can't announce anything yet because I don't have approval on things, but I'm hopeful in the near future to engage with OmniAir and other standards organizations, other forums where SCMS issues are discussed, to share sort of what some of those plans are, what some of the things that we're thinking about can maybe help move the SCMS community forward. And that's really, I think the message that I want to send here today is that, the DoT is very much behind V2X communications. We very much want IOOs to deploy this equipment, and we understand that there is more SCMS work to do, and the DoT does want to help with that. And so we are coming. Like I said, I just started in this federal role in July, so it's I'm still getting my feet underneath me and getting those programs in place. But like I said, hopefully over the next couple months, I'll be able to start sharing some of those plans and ideas, with communities like this. But I also just want to mention that, we do have a lot of other resources where, for V2X, which will include, SCMS in the future as well. One, we are just getting ready to start a new connectivity cohort, focused on V2X communications. It's going to be a group of folks with that have funded V2X deployments through DOT. And we're going to use that group, and it'll include folks like Blaine Leonard and other sort of other folks that are very much in the throes of deploying, LTE V2X devices right now. It's going to include them. We're going to hopefully get some of the lessons learned from them on sort of the issues that they encountered early, and then help try and develop that guidance to help folks that are brand new to this, hopefully avoid some of the issues and things that the other earlier deployers have encountered. Also, sort of going along with that is a new Smart Communities Resource Center that the DoT has set up. It's sort of right now collecting a lot of the existing guidance, training and documentation that have been helpful for V2X. Some of it is DSRC based, but it's still applicable. And so for those areas, we're posting that now. Also generating lots of more work, lots of new training, lots of new guidance documentation and things like that. And again, SDMS will be a part of that. So obviously we will be I will be in talking with a lot of you to help sort of vet and understand whether this documentation is really hitting the mark for the community. And like I said, this is sort of just the beginning for what the DoT wants to provide. We understand how complicated and challenging V2X deployments can be, right? There's a lot of moving pieces. Security is never simple, right? It's always a complicated task. And like I said, the DoT is going to be focused on trying to help bring that expertise and help to sort of the entire community. And so we will have a lot more to say in the near future. And to sort of preview that, we will be having another V2X summit that we're going to be calling Saving Lives with Connectivity. Hopefully you will see a save the date in the very near future, possibly today, but definitely sometime this week. It will be in late October in Southeast Michigan. So folks can start planning there. Like I said, once the save the date comes out, it should have the actual firm date of the event. The location, I think, is still a little bit in flux just as we try and find the right space for it. But it will be somewhere in Southeast Michigan. And as always, there will be in-person attendance available as well as virtual options. But yeah, the big thing we want to let everybody know is that there is another V2X summit coming, and the big thing that I want to sort of get the word out about this is I know the last couple V2X summits we did a lot of listening, we did a lot of sort of information gathering. So this V2X summit will be much more on sort of the US DoT announcing sort of new programs, new opportunities, some of these new things I'm talking about to provide guidance and help to deployers. This is really going to be, focused on providing, the start of the DoT's vision for how to roll out V2X moving forward, and really, focusing on, how we hope to help the community and also give the community, the ability to tell us whether, we heard right or we need to course correct. So definitely please, put that on your calendar when you get the save the date. If you don't get the save the date, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, I can make sure that you get a copy of it. If you've been to previous V2X summits, you should get the announcement automatically. You shouldn't have to go anywhere. Anybody that the DoT usually keeps track of who participated previously. So with that, that ends my session, and I'll hand it back over to Burkinda.
Thank you so much, Justin. We appreciate that. We are looking forward to that announcement. If I could have Virendra join us on screen, please. Hello, Virendra. So what we have, Virendra is going to speak to you all about is what is new in 609.2.1 and why it was created. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Burkinda. So I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, all good.
Yeah. So So my daughter and I, we were listening to this song from her playlist, and this line, "Let's pretend we are running out of time," was quite thought-provoking. Of course, for V2X, we do not have to pretend. We are, in fact, running out of time. Every day that we don't have this widely deployed V2X, we are missing on all the immense benefits, safety, efficiency, and mobility benefits that this technology has to offer. So in this presentation, I will briefly talk about the history of SCMS, including the CAMP specification and the 1609.2.1. I will also go over the significant differences between the two specs and then finally conclude. So as you can see, V2X security has a long history. And to be clear, this presentation is not about criticizing the past work. I have been directly involved in most of the work on this slide, starting from around 2012. And I am very proud of all the work that we did at CAMP. We did a lot of good work at CAMP, and as you will see in the coming slides, what we did in IEEE 1609.2.1 is we took the CAMP specs and tried to make it better. In short, this 1609.2.1 standard is an evolution as opposed to revolution from the CAMP specs. My colleague William White and I have been the technical editors of this standard, the first version of which was published in 2020, December of 2020, and the second and also the current version was published mid of last year. We are hoping to work on a new version mid next year, where we can address all the issues uncovered by the OmniAir and other implementers of this standard worldwide. I won't read the history line by line, but you can see that the specs started being developed as far back as in 2005. At CAMP, this spec has evolved over almost more than 10 years until 2018, when we took over the design of and maintenance of this spec in IEEE 1609.2.1. So in terms of the enhancements and benefits of this standard, at a high level, I want to highlight that certificate management protocols, which is the topic of this presentation, they are designed to provision end entities with digital certificates and everything else needed for a secure communication using digital certificates. So in this standard, the main enhancements are in root CA management, where the different roles for electors and different models of roles for electors has been clarified and made more robust. Then we have certificate permissions. So 1609.2.1 has a bit of a less emphasis on enrollment step. There is an ability to adapt to permissions in certificates issued to enrolled devices. And in this standard, we also allow X509 enrollment certificate to enable greater use of existing infrastructure at the automotive OEMs. This standard also introduces supplementary authorization. So we support OAuth, and in principle, we also support other mechanisms to manage access to the resources. And finally, one of the main enhancement is introducing this ACPC-based certificate access management. This is an optional technology that enables better robustness in the case of widespread compromise. So the first topic, root CA management. In the CAMP specification, we had electors that issued what we call ballots. And these ballots were generated by the electors independent of each other. So the electors, they basically made independent decisions and they were not required to coordinate. This can result in the trust domain getting fragmented or diluted. So consider a system that starts with 5 electors, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Next, if electors 1, 2, and 3 issue endorsement for a new elector 6, and likewise electors 3, 4, and 5 issue a new endorsement for elector 7. In this case, now we see a fragmented trust management system. So the EEs, the end entities, they will be left confused if electors don't coordinate, and the perception of trust state could depend on order of ballots received in, and also which electors are endorsing which other electors. So it's kind of hard to ensure consistency in this case. Moving on to 1609.2.1, we took the elector-based management system designed in CAMP, and we added what we call a CMS manager that creates this CTL or certificate trust list based on the policies defined by the SCMS manager. This specification clarifies who has the responsibility of doing what. It decouples the policy choices from authorization. So SCMS manager decides who should be trusted, and the electors sign the trust statements, aka the certificate trust list. Electors are independent entities that notarize SCMS manager decisions. So 1609.2.1 directly addresses the CAMP, the concerns that I just pointed out in the last slide in the CAMP model of the problem of coordination. So the SCMS manager decides who is in a particular trust domain, and electors simply notarize that decision. In this system, there can be multiple certificate trust lists in the ecosystem, and an elector can act as an elector for more than one certificate trust list and more than one SCMS manager. The trusted electors are listed on each CTL, and this system also allows for removing an elector that has been shown to be misbehaving. Here and in the coming slide, I would like to point out that the SCMS manager that we refer in this slide and also in the coming slides, it refers to the component of the SCMS whose role is to govern the entire SCMS as defined in the standard. This name is not to be confused with any specific instances of the SCMS manager component that also happen to be called by the same name. For example, the scmsmanager.org. So moving on to the next topic of certificate permissions. Here, both the CAMP and the 1609.2.1 spec have the same overall flow for certificate request. At a high level, an enrollment certificate is a certificate that is used to request authorization certificates and also to manage other interactions between an end entity and the SCMS. On the other hand, an authorization certificate is a certificate that is used to authorize application activities. So with these two types of certificates in mind, an end entity first requests and obtains this enrollment certificate from the enrollment authority. The end entity then requests authorization certificates from the registration authority using enrollment certificate to authenticate the request. And the RA, the registration authority, checks that the end entity is entitled to authorization certificates and issues them if so. The main difference between the CAMP and the 1609.2.1 specification is in how the RA establishes what is permitted in the authorization certificate. So in the CAMP spec, the authorization certificate, which can be of the type application identification or pseudonym, their permissions have to exactly match the permissions on an enrollment certificate. Now, because this mapping is so kind of hard coded in the design that it makes this system quite inflexible in terms of adding new applications in the field, moving RSUs such as work zone RSUs from one location to another. It also puts pressure on enrollment process to get everything right. So to get all the permissions right, because if not, then the device needs to be enrolled again. And it's also a bit hard to correct or change afterwards because the enrollment can be quite burdensome. So in 1609.2.1, we kind of try to relax those hard-coded permission modeling. So in 1609.2.1, the permission constraint is relaxed from enrollment certificate permissions mapping exactly to the authorization certificate permissions. We have this model where enrollment certificate permissions is a superset of the permissions in the authorization certificate permissions. The RA or the registration authority stores and manages the permissions associated with each enrollment certificate using the certificate as a lookup key. In the extreme case or the bounding case, the permissions in the enrollment certificate can be a wildcard or all, and where the restrictions are entirely managed by the registration authority and not the enrollment authority. Some implications of this model is that authorization certificate request now needs to include requested permissions, because the enrollment certificate permissions is a superset of permission that can be requested in the authorization certificate. However, we don't need subtypes of request for different types of authorization certificates, as the RA is assumed to know which permissions are authorized for that particular authorization certificates. And we can support X509 enrollment certificate because the permissions are not necessarily encoded in the certificate. For example, the wildcard option that I mentioned earlier. So to summarize, in 1609.2, we have relaxed the permission constraint from exactly mapping from enrollment to authorization to having enrollment encode permission that is a superset of permissions. This change in the design philosophy had a knock-on effect on several aspects of the certificate request. So we needed a different way to communicate the requested permissions to the registration authority. The enrollment certificates, they don't need to contain permissions at all, and the enrollment process and even the certificate format can be left open. Certificate permission restrictions was the main reason why we moved away from CAMP specification, and the enrollment flexibility is the reason why people should adopt the 1609.2.1 specification. So the next topic is the supplementary authorization. So in 1609.2.1, we have decoupled the certificate permissions that enable supplementary authorization in 1609.2.1. So this can be used for access control on download requests. So for example, authorization certificate request messages that are directly signed by the enrollment certificate can use this supplementary authorization service. In the in the current specification, we only specify one mechanism, but as I said earlier, this can be extended and enable other mechanisms if needed in future. So the mechanism that is enabled in the current specification is known as OAuth 2.0. This is an optional feature in the SCMS. So the end entity authenticates with an authorization service to receive these access tokens. And the end entity includes that access token in the request to the registration authority. And the RA, the registration authority, uses those access tokens to authorize the end entity request. It allows the use of off-the-shelf web technologies to enable a more scalable access control management in the for certificate access. The next topic of enhancement in 1609.2.1 is re-enrollment. As you might be aware, enrollment certificates have a lifetime and they expire. So the devices with enrollment certificates, they need to obtain new ones when the existing enrollment certificate are about to expire. The CAMP specification did not provide a ready protocol for reissuance of enrollment certificates. However, there have been some retrofit protocols designed and published by scmsmanager.org. In 1609.2.1, we include a straightforward mechanism for requesting a successor enrollment certificate through this newly developed API in the standard. And the next topic is the ACPC-based certificate access. So this is another enhancement in the 1609.2.1 specification. Here, ACPC stands for Activation Codes for Pseudonym Certificates. It is an alternative mechanism for certificate access in the 1609.2.1 standard. This mechanism is supported by a new component called Certificate Access Manager, or CAM for short. This mechanism is not required, but it can be supported if desired. And this mechanism provides a means to efficiently remove compromised devices in case of a widespread compromise. This has ability to handle widespread compromise much better than the existing mechanism of CRLs. This is at a very high level how the ACPC-based certificate access works. So the certificates that are provided to the end entity are encrypted using a locking value. This is integrated with other SCMS operations to preserve privacy against the SCMS components like the CA or the RA. Because of this locking value, encryption using this locking value, the end entity that cannot directly access the certificates without the corresponding unlocking value. And the activation codes that are derived using a binary tree are published to enable unlocking these encrypted certificates. So with this ACPC-based mechanism, we have two ways of removing untrusted identities from the system using a CRL as specified in the 1609.2 standard, or by no longer publishing these unlocking values. So the certificates will remain encrypted on the end entity. And the 1609.2.1 standard is quite huge. There are a lot of other changes that I didn't go over, and here is a very brief overview of the additional changes that we made in the standard. So we changed the certificate chain file to also include the new form of certificate trust list. In this standard, we enable direct download of different certificate management objects like CRL, that is certificate revocation list, or CTL, which is a certificate trust list. We also clarified requirements on different types of certificates. We also clarified different validity conditions for all the different message types. And we also improved on the consistency of how end entities can know when to download new batches of certificates. So with that said, I am on my concluding slide. So I presented to you the 1609.2.1 standard. So we have these three options in terms of deployment. We can use the 1609.2.1 specification, or we can stay with the CAMP specification, or we could be somewhere in the middle. We could use a hybrid solution that has elements of both. And I would argue that sticking with the first option, 1609.2, is the best way forward. As I showed you in previous slides, CAMP's tight coupling of enrollment certificate and authorization certificate permission is inflexible compared to 1609.2.1. The 1609.2.1 model enables a much better root CA management by having electors and CTL and SCMS manager. And finally, there is no point in going with the hybrid approach of using both 1609.2.1 and CAMP, because it's better to have 100% consistency with a single specification to reduce implementation costs, test costs, design risks, etc. So with that, I conclude. I hand over the presentation to Perkenta.
Thank you so much, Virendra. Thank you. Brian Romansky, if we can get you on the screen here, we're going to talk about the status of conformance testing and validation.
Thank you, Perkenda. Give me a second while I share some content. So I'm just rounding out. We've got several different views of 1609.2.1. From Justin, you heard about the regulatory view and the DOT view. And in my role working with SCMS Manager as the chair of scmsmanager.org, we work closely with DOT in defining how to actually take these abstract technical concepts and put them into policies and make them working and supportable and you know, a set of capabilities that have a long-term lasting implementation that will support North America. You've heard from Virendra the details about what's in 1609.2, why it was created, and what's different between that and the original CAMP specification. Worked closely with Virendra and the definition of that CAMP specification. I agree. I think we can both be proud of the work done on the original work, but there's also good reason for making changes. We've learned a lot since then in the initial deployments, and a lot of devices have been rolled out, and so that learning has been baked into 1609.2.1. And I'm going to talk a bit about the certification view. So in my role as the chair of the cybersecurity working group at OmniAir, I work closely with various technology implementers on defining testing requirements for 1609.2.1 to ensure interoperability. And also my work with ISS, Integrity Security Services. We rolled out the very first implementation of SCMS, and we continue to support the vast majority of vendors, and have been working with them to help them through this transition. And actually, it looked like there was a question that came up in the group earlier. So if you do have questions about the transition from CAMP 2.2.1, I would suggest you work with your SCMS provider, and they can help you understand the timing and how to work through that transition the goal is to make sure that the existing pilots can continue to create value and that there's a smooth transition to rolling out .2.1. Couple of comments on the role of OmniAir in all of this, again, from the cybersecurity working group within OmniAir. So our focus is to make sure that there's a consistent interpretation. As Virendra pointed out, there's a lot of new capabilities built into 1609.2.1. So the goal of creating this test plan and these test cases is to make sure that there's a consistent way to make sure that devices are conformant and compliant and that their interpretation of .2.1 is consistent. So test case 764B is what we affectionately refer to it as internally. This is the first conformance test case for .2.1. It has 57 individual tests that you can run through that are pretty extensive in terms of making sure that an end entity or a unit is working correctly, is interacting with an SCMS provider in a consistent way. So we can run these tests with a variety of different devices, make sure that you have consistency and interoperability. You've heard that word several times. Obviously, the goal is to make sure that each device implements these features in a consistent way. Fortunately, in 1609.2.1, there are some options, so not all devices need to implement all of the capabilities or all of the features, but there are some basic functionalities that have to be consistent, have to work well. Over time, conformance testing will become part of your normal device or OBU and RSU certification requirements. So as new devices are manufactured and built, they will be tested against this to make sure that they have those basic capabilities to support the .2.1 functionality. In the nearer term, you've heard that we're hosting a virtual test event later this week. So when we looked across those 57 test cases for the full test suite, we realized that many of those test cases can be executed over a wide area network. You don't really need to be physically face-to-face with the device vendor and the SCMS. The whole system was designed to work remotely over a network. So the diagram shown here just shows the general architecture of what happens between an end entity, the EE at the bottom, and the SCMS at the top. For most of the test cases, you don't actually need a radio. You don't actually need to be in proximity of the device. And for most of the test cases, you can just execute commands from the EE against the SCMS. So we've chosen a subset of 10 test cases that are sort of the basic functionality of device registration, enrollment, provisioning, and then validating the device got the right provisioning information. So these 10 test cases cover sort of those basic steps. We've published those, made those available to device vendors, to SCMS vendors. And so over several days this week, on the 20th and the 21st, Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to be running a series of tests where we've paired up device vendors with SCMS providers. They're going to run through a scripted set of tests and see what happens. We're going to publish anonymized results that show how many devices were tested, how many tests were successful, and just show the general state of adoption of 1609.2.1. Part of the goal of this is to show that .2.1, the specification is mature, well-defined, that basic functionality is achievable, that there's at least a few device vendors that are implementing it correctly, and that there's consistency among the SCMS providers so that a vendor can be confident that if they implement the standard, they can work with a variety of vendors. So looking forward to working with the device vendors. I think we also have a couple of test scripts that will be going through this process. So in addition to mature end entity devices, we'll also be running some test scripts just to make sure that understanding of the standards is consistent across the different SCMS providers. So we'll actually be running test scripts against each other's systems to see how well that works and to see which tests are successful. Those anonymized results, again, will show the number of units that were tested and the tests that were successful coming out of this. This is a result of a lot of work, so I thank everybody who participates on the cybersecurity working group, trying to coordinate and schedule. We've got a global community of device manufacturers, SCMS providers, and people interested in monitoring, engaging in these tests. So trying to schedule these pairwise sessions and define exactly what we're going to test and communicate to everybody has been a challenge. So I appreciate all the help from OmniAir and the volunteers on the working group to make that happen. And I've also mentioned that the testing will continue. So this virtual Plug Fest is a first phase. Because we realized so much of this testing could be done remotely, we decided to take advantage of that and coordinate this test event. But it'll be followed by the in-person Taipei Plug Fest that OmniAir is going to be running. So that's coming up in November. Additional testing will happen, so that will also be an opportunity for device vendors, SCMS providers to work together. If there's a need for additional support or follow-up testing, you could either do it in live at the Taipei Plug Fest or remotely with an SCMS vendor once you're at the Plug Fest. You'll be able to get additional technical support from the vendors and clarifying the issues that came up in the initial testing. Another reason for doing this virtual plug fest is to get early results and know exactly what's working, what's not, so that when we show up at the in-person plug fest, we can have some solid tests and follow up with things that maybe have been ambiguous or unclear during the initial plug fest, because we've seen in the past sometimes it takes a few tries to get the general understanding of these things. And the results of the virtual plug fest will be shared at the Taipei Plug Fest. So if you're there, you'll get to see the status of the industry and how it's moving over time. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Prakenda and OmniAir to close it out.
Thank you so much, Brian. So we do have some time for some Q&A. So if I can have Virendra and Justin, if you all could rejoin us here, that would be great. So it looks like there are some questions. Let's see. Let me pop up this screen. One question that came through that was answered, it looks like we have, is the upcoming V2X Summit mentioned an extension of the V2X workshops that have been happening, with the previous one being at the end of ITSA 23 back in spring this year? And I know, Justin, you had answered that and saying this is going to be the next meeting in the series. Is there anything else you'd like to expand on that question?
No, just like I mentioned during my briefing, the last couple of sessions have been very much focused on, DOT listening to, what the community needs. And so this one is going to hopefully show you what the DOT heard and is trying to do to meet those needs. But also there will be some interactive elements to it, for folks to give feedback on what we're out presenting. So I'm excited to hear everybody's thoughts about, where the DOT plans to go over the next couple of years.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. The next question was about slides being shared. Yes, the slides will be shared as well. This presentation will be available on our YouTube as of tomorrow. So the entire presentation will be in there. You can segment it and kind of pick out what you'd like to listen to or share with your teams. Next, we have a question. I believe, Brian, you might have answered this as you were speaking, but we want to expand on it. The question is, what do I need to do with my camp-based pilot to migrate to the Superior 609.2.1 solution? I wish this information was presented sooner.
Yeah, so I'll just repeat that my recommendation there is work with your SCMS provider. There's be a phased transition of devices. So in most cases, you'll have a software update from your device vendor that will enhance your device to support 1609.2.1, and that will provide forward continuity of service. SCMS vendors, some of them support both the traditional camp method and 1609.2.1. So devices that are in that transition period can work with a vendor that has both models and seamlessly transition to the new model without any interruption in service. And then going forward, you're going to want to spec out devices that have .2.1 support. So you shouldn't look at this as a case where your devices are going to become obsolete. I think the vast majority of device vendors are well aware of this transition. There's no hard changes that are going to require fundamental hardware differences or anything like that. So I think most devices is going to be a software update and you'll have these capabilities. And again, if you work with your SCMS provider, you should be able to work out a smooth transition plan for all of your devices.
Got it. And I guess that brings us to the next question. It looks like it's directed at you, Brian. It says, who are the members of SCMS Manager organization and why has this been kept a secret?
So SCMS Manager is a membership organization. We don't publish a membership list, but if you join as a member of SCMS Manager, you can engage with our work groups and you will quickly learn who your peers are from other companies, other company corporate sponsors. We have recently made a change. So in the past, an observer member status was only available to government entities. We've actually made that available now to anybody. So even if you're a corporate entity, a for-profit company, you can join SCMS Manager as an observer member. It doesn't cost anything. So that gives you access to discussions, to the work groups. You can participate in the discussions. The only limitation is that as an observer member, you can't vote on final policies and final decisions. So that's reserved for full members, which there is a cost for that. The rationale there is we want the stability of the organization to be maintained going forward. So that's why we make that requirement.
Perfect. And I see our Jason Conley, our executive director, has rejoined our chat here as well. So Jason, I think we covered some of the questions. If there are any other questions, please go ahead and type them in the Q&A box. I'll go ahead and read those as they come in. Jason, did you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
Well, not really. I just wanted to say thank you to each of the presenters. I think you each articulated very well different aspects of security and testing and what a challenge this actually is. So congratulations for great presentations, and we're wishing each of the vendors and SCMS providers that are participating in the testing this week the best of luck, and looking forward to seeing those results. And we hope to see many of you at the OmniAir Taipei Plugfest in Taiwan this November. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see if we have any other questions. I do not see that we have any. So with that, Brian, Virendra, Justin, actually, do you guys have anything else you'd like to add? Just if you want to leave any parting words for our members and community and security at all?
I will just say I'm looking forward to the next DOT V2X Summit. I found the last two to be very informative, great chance to connect to the community, and great chance to connect with the key decision makers. So looking forward to that. So thanks for letting us know that's coming.
Awesome. Well, then I have one more thing I'd like to share, just some announcements. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so we do have some upcoming events as we discussed here today. We have our virtual testing event that does start today, so that's happening right now. September 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern, that is our monthly membership meeting. We would love for you all to join us for that. We have Robert Galvin joining us. He is the Port of Authority of New York, New Jersey's CTO. Just a wealth of knowledge. If you've not heard him speak about all of the things, please come and join us for that presentation. That's going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern, like I said. November 6th to 10th, we have our Taipei Plugfest. We do have our call for speakers that is still open. So if you have any questions about that call for speakers, go ahead and contact me, or if you want to contact Ryan about the Plugfest, he is still entertaining those conversations as well. The QR code is because we just have so many things going on. It's too hard to put all the links, but just know that if you've joined this presentation, or if you had somebody who signed up who missed the presentation, in the recap of what goes out with the replay, you will have a direct link to sign up for a couple of these things when it goes out. And with that, thank you, Brian, Justin, Virendra, Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. And everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.